is being given by Julianne Schneider, who is the lead data curator for Harvard Catalyst Clinical and Translational Science Center. She's an expert in data curation, application of metadata for improved discovery, and ontologies. Her past career includes being an insurance librarian on Wall Street, a metadata librarian for NYU Medical Center and the Harvard Medical School, a database designer for EBSCO, and a metadata specialist for the Research Data Curation Program at UC San Diego. She is also a certified instructor for the Carpentries and has taught several library carpentry workshops. Let's give a warm welcome to Julianne.
Good morning. A few small housekeeping items. I live in Chicago, even though I work for Harvard in Boston. And then I came down south, and I have been completely overcome with allergies. So if my voice starts breaking or squeaking, that's why. But we'll get through it. The other thing is, the first half of this, I'll be presenting about what Metadata 2020 is and some of the projects that we've just started to work on. And then the second half, I'd like to take advantage of being in a room with a bunch of serials catalogers who create a lot of the metadata and apply a lot of the metadata to the serials information. Because that's the part that really moves throughout the entirely scholarly communication cycle, and everybody touches it in some way. From the researcher who's publishing, to the publishers, to librarians, users, everybody. So toward the end, I was going to ask you if you wanted to get into some groups and start maybe giving us some user stories about what your roadblocks are, what works really well for you, what doesn't work, especially vis-a-vis these other parts of the cycle with the publishers and the researchers. Do you have stories about that could help us in what Metadata 2020 is trying to do? So if you want to move up at some point, when I start asking for small groups, which probably will be at about 20, 30 minutes, if you want to do it now, you can, or if you want to do it when I ask for it, you can. And anyone is allowed to go to the bathroom at any time. You're like, move around. Don't worry about, getting out of your seat. So I'm going to start with my presentation. And what happened to the first slide? Oh, there it is. Metadata 2020 started up about a year or so ago. And the reason I got involved with it was because I saw a Twitter, and it was a tweet from a publishing conference, and they had a Google Doc, and they had all these questions about metadata. And they were inviting people in the meeting to go in and add their thoughts. Well, I wasn't at the meeting, but I have thoughts about metadata, so I went in and just started typing. And they got back to me and said, wow, you said really good things. Would you like to join this new group? And I said, sure. By the way, I know we presented on this last year. Anybody in here in that presentation? No? Oh, a few, okay. So this is an update. This isn't going to be the same old thing. So I'll be brief about what Metadata 2020 is. What it is, we're a bunch of people trying to define issues around metadata and how we can make it work better. And I guess from the name, we're supposed to be doing this by 2020, which I think is sanguine, but why not aim high? We started out with group work in 6 different communities, and we did some problem defining, and we did some figuring out what our challenges and opportunities were, and talked to each other. And here are the 6 community groups. When I was practicing this, I didn't create these slides. These are created by the fabulous Claire Dean, our consultant, and I'm not sure why she put funders in the black type, but I'm sorry, funders. I don't know what happened there. I was head of the librarians group, but these are the other 6, and this is one of the reasons I got so interested in this movement, the group, because it includes everybody. It includes the funders and researchers and service providers, as well as librarians and publishers. It was started at Crossref, the idea of Ginny Hendricks. Her title is instigator. And so Crossref supported that idea that we needed to improve our metadata, and so they started the core group, got some communities together. The communities talked about all their challenges and opportunities, and we decided to go the group route because we can talk to each other and then collaborate crosswise and see where we have our differences and where we have our similarities. And that way we're not siloing ourselves. And we're trying to get stuff done. This is not something that's just going to be talking. We have projects now. And here they are. It's the year of action for Metadata 2020. So that's the other thing about these slides. I was like, oh my God, it's the year of action. I didn't know. But I know now. It's good because we are acting. We have 6 projects. The first project is about researcher communications. And this is a biggie. I was looking at the NASIG program, and there's a lot about data, and there's a lot about researchers in this program. And I think in many ways it's because suddenly data really is part of the publishing cycle. You're seeing data sets and all the issues that come with description, its relationship to the citation, and its relationship to the creator. We're still trying to figure out how all that works. And so this project is about asking the researchers how they think it might work, and they're going to be asking the publishers who have improved their metadata and how that's going. Project 2 I think, speaks mostly, or at least the most to this group. It's metadata recommendations and element mapping. And if I have time, I will bring up the spreadsheet we're working on. We're listing all of the metadata schemas and standards we can find, and logging the information about them, and figuring out how we map them across. Is there an elemental set of metadata for the scholarly communication and publishing and description worlds? And I know that that's been the question since the beginning of time. But since we've got everybody in the same room for once, maybe we can come up with something, or maybe we can discover it truly is a pipe dream. But at least we're going to try. So that's what we're doing. We've got our list, and we're adding to it now. We just started this. And we're going to collaborate with Project 5, which is talking about, I believe, the best practices. But I'll get to that. This is the project that I kind of instigated, because when I was in my library group meetings, we would often talk about things and then we'd have to backtrack. Well, what metadata are we talking about? I often start conversations with people who talk about metadata with, well, what do you mean about metadata? Or what are you talking about when you say that word? Because it can mean so many different things. And if you think about, especially now that I run a triple store and link data, we've got, well, what do you mean when you say element, concept, term, property, schema, standard, vocabulary? That can mean different things to different people. And if we can find a way to somehow agree on some of the definitions for some of these terms and tease out when we use them how, it could really help us talk to each other and to the other people in the cycle. When I was at UC San Diego, I was working with a bunch of archaeological grad students. And I was telling them how we could put their images and data into our repository. And I kept talking about, well, when you put them in, each one of their objects is going to get an archival resource. K, what's the K mean? Something. Anyway, the ARC, ARCs. It's a kind of persistent identifier. So I'm like talking ARC this and ARC that, and they're looking really worried. And I finally stopped and said, what's wrong? And they were like, oh, ma'am, our dig was in an old mining town. We don't have any ARCs. I was like, oh, not those kind of ARCs. I know you don't have those ARCs. This is just a URL. So yeah, sometimes disciplinary people use words in a different way than we do. Group 4 is interesting. Incentives for proving metadata quality. We can send all of the recommendations out there we want, but unless institutions and publishers get on board, it won't happen. So this group's looking to communicate the value of good metadata and the value of talking to each other about metadata to solve the problems. And Project 5 is quite related to Project 2. I think they're taking the work of the mapping group and trying to develop a higher level of best practices and principles. And so that means bringing into the discussion, sharing tags and elements, figuring out what other people think of as best practices, what is already out there that talks about best practices around metadata, and do those things work with each other, or do they conflict with each other? And if they do, which one do we choose? And creating a set of principles along the lines of FAIR. Has everybody heard of FAIR? It's a set of principles surrounding data that was created by the Force 11 group, and it's ways to assess your data to see if it's findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Yes. And it's all over the data world right now. You can't go anywhere without hearing about FAIR. So it's a big deal, and maybe we'll model ours on FAIR, since it seems to be catching on. And finally, Project 6, metadata evaluation and guidance. I have to admit, it's been a while since I've cataloged, but I did it for years, and I'm trying to think about how many evaluation tools for metadata I ever came across, and I can't say I came across very many. Maybe I'm just a bad cataloger, but I think this is a great idea. I was just thinking, wouldn't it be great to have a machine where you plugged in your metadata and it spit something back out that said, no, this is great metadata, or no, this is not enough, no one will find this item, or this is too much, you're going to confuse everyone. So having some kind of evaluator like that would be really great. In addition to evaluating, let's say, your vocabulary, terms that you attach. So this group is going to be looking at that. So those are our 6 projects. If you want to get on board with any of those, you can email Claire. I would say talk to me and I'll give you my card, but I don't have my card yet. So you can give me your card and I can get back to you. Or we are all over social media. So I think there's a form you can sign up for that is on our website there at metadata2020.org. And you can sign up for, I think, individual projects, or just say, put me wherever. Does anyone have any questions about this? No, all right. Well, so this was the part where I told you about what it was, and here's the part where, that's interesting. I made a tiny URL for that Google Drive, and it didn't make it into my presentation. I'll find it. What would sort of like from you is, do you have user stories, and I'll let you think about this for a few minutes. And I'm just making up things that you might have a user story about. It could be anything. Are there stories about how you work with metadata, and are there things that are stories about what you find difficult, or what really works for you that you don't see others doing, or a good story about a researcher or a faculty member or another librarian that you interacted with surrounding metadata, and it worked or it didn't. And also some of the current roadblocks in the sharing. Mark, we know our stuff is often in proprietary ILS systems. Are there other roadblocks that we maybe don't know about that you guys face that you could tell us about? Oh, whoops. Yeah. And also, there was one more that I'm blanking on, but let me find the Google Docs. Is anybody game for this, to like get into some small groups and discuss some of these things with somebody maybe as a note taker and can just note down information that I can take back to the group? Okay, so why don't you guys just arrange yourselves in groups of like 5 or 6 and just